Do we really need to identify male or female on those? For example, if you have a woman who's very male presenting, that is, she looks very masculine, it's just her body type, and she's identified as a female on a passport, it may actually endanger her, because people's first look is, oh, that's a man, and then they say, what the heck is going on? And but do we really need to identify male or female at all on a passport or on a driver's license? So there, maybe we can just let the categories go. What's important for identification is probably height and eye color and hair color and body weight, those things, and, you know, maybe in some future retinal pattern, some world of the future retinal pattern.
You know, it strikes me that actually reading your book convinced me, in some ways, biology has already abandoned the bipolar, because you can't explain the biological regularities and the biological systematicity without appeal to a more articulated set of categories. I mean, you can't describe these syndromes without, you know, going down a level and talking about genes and hormones and all that
right,
kind of stuff.
That's absolutely right. When I or anyone else lectures to a group of embryology students or a group of medical students, we don't talk about sex as one thing. We talk about sex at 6 or 7 or 8 different levels, starting with chromosomes and then things that are going on in the fetus and then things that happen at birth and then at adolescence. And each of these is referred to as a kind of sex. So the biologists understand that there's a more complex underlying story.
Yeah. You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're discussing sex and gender with Anne Fausto-Sterling, professor of biology and gender studies at Brown University.
Coming up, we'd like to imagine a sex-gender utopia. What would it be like? How would we think of these things if we weren't dragged down from bipolar preconceptions of the past? Would all cultural distinctions between the genders disappear, or would we have to reinvent pretty much what we've got now? Join us by calling 415-841-4134. That's 415-841-4134.
Philosophy Talk. We'll be right back.
I've got to be a macho. Macho man, yeah.
The Village People with Macho Man. This is Philosophy Talk, and I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. We're talking gender with Anne Fausto-Sterling of Brown University. We'd like you to join our conversation. You can do so by giving us a call, 415-841-4134.
That's 415-841-4134. Or you can email your thoughts to comments@philosophytalk.org.
So, Anne, I want to ask you a question about socialization again. I want to go back to that just briefly. Look, I've read in lots of literature, you know, that actually, who's responsible for gender socialization? You might think, well, parents, the schools, teachers, the broader community. But it looks like the people who are most responsible for it are the kids themselves. Boys like to play with boys. Girls like to play with girls, prefer to play with girls. The style of play is different. Boys won't let girls integrate into their groups very easily. Girls let boys integrate into their groups more easily. And despite parents' and teachers' best efforts, young children segregate themselves into gendered specific groups, and they do this all around the world. So it seems like this, you know, gender segregation is somehow built into us by, at least partly by nature. I mean, it's partly cultural because, you know, the play styles vary from culture to culture, but this division, it seems pretty nearly universal. What do you think about that?
You know, I think it's hard to argue from the universal. That's one thing. Because something's universal doesn't mean it's biological. The phenomenon you're talking about begins to show up in kids at about 2.5 or 3 years of age.
Right.
By that time, they've already developed quite a lot. And let me give you another example of a so-called well-established sex or gender difference, that of language. It seems that girls, at least in U.S. culture, by the age of 2.5, say, are talking sooner, have more words in their vocabulary, and are, you know, just better chatters already. And so you'd say, it's biological because it happened so young. But it also turns out that parents from the day of birth talk more to girl children than they do to boy children. They look them in the eye more, they chatter more to them, they have more conversations with them. So one presumes that there's a kind of spiral development going on, a kind of systematic development where differences do emerge at interestingly young ages, 2-3 years of age, and they can remain quite fixed for the rest of someone's life, but they don't emerge in a vacuum. The genes speaking from the soul or anything like that. They emerge as a response to, as a product of a continual interaction between the social and sensory world.
And I get your point. I'm not sure. We could argue back and forth about this for a while. We got a caller, I think, who wants to get in on this point here. Dee Dee in San Francisco. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Dee Dee.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I wanted to make the point from the standpoint that I live mostly in a community of bisexual polyamorous families who work very hard to not have specific gender roles and ways of raising their children. And what I've noticed is that children brought into that atmosphere after they're quite, have maybe 6, 7, 8 years old, still hold on to those gender roles they were raised with that were strongly male versus female. And the children who seem to be born into the community already and are raised with this, without this set, this is what boys do, this is what girls do, adapt so much better into just being who they are as opposed to trying to fill specific roles. Case in point, I know of one little 8-year-old boy who knows he's a boy, feels strongly that he's a boy, who has no problems with running around in dresses and fairy costumes and just enjoying being himself and what he likes. And my own children, having come into this, my oldest one still struggles some because she wants to feel stronger in being a stronger girl.
Dee Dee, that's a very good point from an interesting perspective. I want to just push on a little more and then ask you, suppose we really just didn't distinguish between boys and girls from day one any more than we do between brunettes and blondes. We didn't have different pronouns. We didn't have different costumes. We didn't have pink for girls and for boys. I mean, is that a possible way of living? And do you think sex and gender would reemerge if we did that as important things, or do you think they could just be more or less forgotten?
Anne, what do you think?
Oh, I think I don't know the answer to that. I think that there are some early differences between, your average boy and girl. I mean, for example, at 3 months of age, boys have a testosterone surge that girls don't have. I don't know how that would affect neural activity, for example. But I do think that there's also a huge variability within each group, so, to the point where the different groups overlap. So whether some new sort of binary would emerge, or whether what you'd have are new groupings that emerge that have some boys and girls in one group and some other rather different feeling boys and girls in another group, I just think it's unclear and probably practically impossible to find the answer to.
So on unclarity and ambiguity, we'll bring the discussion to
we'll have to say goodbye to you. I know you need to get going in, and it's been really a great pleasure having you. Our guest has been Professor Anne Fausto-Sterling, author of Sexing the Body. Thank you for joining us on Philosophy Talk, Anne.
You're very welcome.
Thanks a lot, Anne.
You're welcome.
So, John, what did you learn today?
Well, as usual in philosophy, what you learn is mostly what you unlearn.
Yeah, right.
Right? Philosophy is mostly a matter of learning that the way you look at the world is a little more rigid than it should be, and it's painful, but somebody's got to do it.
Well, and we do it with pleasure here on Philosophy Talk. I think this is really fascinating stuff. The fact that if you look at the biology of it, you find this kind of continuum, but our social categories are kind of bipolar, and should we give it up in light of that or not, or should we resist the continuum? I don't know. These are interesting questions.
I don't know. My big hobbies when I was a kid were crocheting, hot pads, and football.
Oh, there you go.
And the only thing I can say is I wasn't much good at either of them.
Yeah, you reflect the multiplicity of
incompetence.
Incompetence,
yes.
John. So, but anyway, so I think this has been a good discussion. I wish we could have had slightly more time for callers and for Anne Fausto-Sterling. I mean, some of you called didn't get a chance to get in because it was a brief thing. But you can learn more about this by visiting our excellent website, www.philosophytalk.org. All kinds of information will be up there.